I am pleased indeed to be seated at the foot of the king, the foot, at the feet of the one and only Mr. Oscar Peterson. He has no idea how I feel about him, really, because I kid him and pretend that, we're equals, but he's the king, really. He is the king. Oscar, this thing that we're doing, we're trying to preserve for the younger generation of some of the history of our music.
Mm-hmm.
How we were inspired, who inspired us, and all of that.
Well, speaking of the word inspiration, I think I'm a good example of it because I was removed from the roots of it. I came from Montreal, as you know, and although it was a jazz center in Canada, it was well removed from New York, far less Kansas City or St. Louis or Chicago.
Right.
And I had to get my background in jazz intravenously, so to speak, through the radio
Yeah.
and recordings. And that was the only way I could,
Right.
I could ingest what was going on, just to listen to the radio at night.
I did as well, I heard you talking to Andre Previn, and the two of you were discussing Art Tatum, and you were telling a story I thought was marvelous about the first time you heard him. Your father brought home recordings?
Yeah, I was studying classical piano, and I was doing pretty good at it, and I was also into the jazz thing a little bit. And I was getting pretty cocky, because at that time I could play most of my fellow students in the jazz thing. And my father sensed this, and he had he knew a tenor saxophone player by the name of George Seeley, who had a record collection. And he showed up this day. He said he brought George Seeley home with him. He said, "Hey, I got something for you to hear." So I said, "Yeah, what is it?" He says, "Another piano player." And I should have known better when he said another piano player.
Yeah.
And he put on this record. I'll never forget the record. It was Tiger Rag by Art. And it stopped me cold. I was decimated. I went to sleep that night. I had nightmares of keyboards chasing me around. I really did. I dreamt all kinds of foolishness, and all pertaining to the piano.
Yes.
The strange thing, Art wasn't in any of it. All I knew is that I heard all these notes and I saw these keyboards coming at me.
Yes.
And I was so messed up that I didn't play for a month. I didn't go near the piano for a month. I didn't want any part of it. I was dejected, and then finally, I started to come back. I started to get curious about how he did this and how this man could get to these heights, And I started listening. And luckily, one good thing, as much as I have loved Art, and I say it without any remorse, one good thing is that I didn't let it overcome me.
Right.
I didn't set out to do everything or play everything he played the way he played it. What I learned was the overall picture of how he looked at the piano. Yeah. And it was confirmed when I had the opportunity of meeting him in person in Washington, D.C. later on.
Yeah, he was one of a kind, really.
That's right. Well, Art was a consummate soloist.
Yes.
He was the epitome of a solo pianist, regardless of what medium you're talking about, jazz, classical, or what have you. And that's what he set out to do, and he did that. I went the other way. I went the way of trios, because I was also a Nat Cole fan, as you know.
Well, you like to stomp, too. I mean, you like to swing, and the smoke comes out, the instrument breathes, piano breathes, and everything happens, The things that I've seen you do in Chicago, in Montreal, and in Toronto, the things that I've seen you do, and then Hollywood. Oh my God, the afternoon sessions, Basin Street and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I've as Ray Brown said in the video some time ago, I always believed that a group as small as a trio could stomp as hard as a big band if they were all doing the right thing. Right. And that's the way we used to operate. We'd go in I won't call any names. We went into Basin Street, for instance, opposite a big band, a well-known big band. And we finished our set, and the leader got up in the stand. He said, "We don't know what to follow that with."
Right.
You know, because we were really stomping in our own medium. We weren't trying to do what they were doing. We were doing what we do best in our own medium.
But that time, you guys did that thing better than anybody in the world, I'm telling you. And I remember seeing you at the Village Vanguard once. And I must tell this story. I don't know if I told you or not. But my wife is a very discerning person. This was in the 50s still, you know. And she said there are two things in the world that were perfect for her. One was Sam Snead's golf swing and Ella Fitzgerald singing. And after your engagement at the at Village Vanguard, the second time we came to see you during that engagement, she said, "I'm very much afraid I'm going to have to put Oscar Peterson in that category with things that are perfect." You know?
Yeah, whichever.
Really, I mean, and this is from like somebody who thinks that Glenn Miller was like the best thing that ever happened since sliced bread. But suddenly she rose to the occasion when you played the piano, and she saw something else in the music.
Well, I've always had an intensity about playing piano. It's a very special experience to me. Anytime that I sit down I was telling Benny Green, who I love, a gifted pianist, as you know, and I was telling him that every time I sit down with an instrument, I try to negotiate with that instrument. He was asking me, how do you handle these different pianos? Some good, some not so good, some bad. Thank God we don't have too many bad ones nowadays. But I told him, I said, the only way to overcome that is you have to sit down and negotiate with the instrument within the first few bars.
Sure.
You make a pact with the instrument that you're going to play it a certain way, and you're going to talk to it a certain way, and hopefully it'll respond to you.
There you go. That response is the thing, isn't it?
Well, I think so.
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
I think so.
Oh, man. I never thought of it like that, negotiate.
Well, you can't go in and fight it. You know, if you fight it, you're dead.
Yes.
You know that. You've seen that happen a lot of times.
Yeah, go in there fighting the piano. I don't think so. Or any other instrument, really. I mean, I think you have to negotiate. I remember seeing Fred Lester Young take out a horn and say, "I'm going to have to put this girl away today. She's not ready to play it. Put her." Took out another one, you know.
That's
It
right.
was fun, really. But another thing that you did, when you branched out and started to do things with big orchestras, and I remember, I think Ernie Wilkins did some of the work.
Yes, he did. He wrote an album for me.
An album, yeah.
Yeah.
And I must say, your West Side Story touches. I mean, it's as poignant as it needs to be poignant. It says so much feeling and glory and with happiness and all the facets you show up at the piano and with your group and with the people you're working with.
I have to tell you the story on West Side Story. It's kind of on that album. We had the school, the jazz school in Toronto at that time called the Advanced School of Contemporary Music. It was Ray Brown,
Yes.
Big Ben, myself, and we were teaching there. And I got a call from Verve Records, and they said, "We would like you to do something on West Side Story." And I said, "Oh, boy, I've heard some of that score, and that's not easy, you know." So could you put something together, and we'd like to do it soon because the show is hot. We'd like to get it out. You know, record companies is like, do it yesterday.
That's what they do to it.
Right?
Yeah.
So while we were teaching, on off periods, I would call the group together in the school, and we'd get in a room somewhere, and we put together arrangements on the album.
All right.
We flew into New York. We arranged that we'd fly in. I think it was on a Tuesday, and we said, "Okay, there are no classes. Just study periods all day Tuesday. We'll be away. We'll be back Wednesday." Flew into New York, and we started the session in the early afternoon, and we finished the album. And they didn't play back tune for tune for tune. We came back in and listened to it. I just sat and listened to it, and they ran through the album. And I said, I remember saying to Jim Davis, I said, "Can we have the studio tomorrow?"
Mm.
He said, "Well, I don't know, but we'll get it for you if you need it." He said, "Why?" I said, "I want to do the album over." And he said, "Well, you finished the album." I said, "Not really.
Mm.
It didn't sit right. You know, it just did not sit right." So we got together the next day and we cut the album that you were referring to, and you could obviously hear the difference between the two performances. You know, there was just something not there on the first one that was there on the second, and I'm glad I did it over.
Oh yes, tenderness, fire, and beauty. I know that the composer virtually, I know he loved it.
Oh,
I know he loved it. You know, to hear his music interpreted like that.
we were almost supposed to do something with him with that.
Yeah.
I wish we'd had the chance.
Oh man. Well, I want to ask you about one other thing too. I never forgot one thing. When I went in the studio in 1955 with Count Basie to record, and we did Every Day I Have the Blues, Come Back, and stuff that we did, Norman Granz, who sat in the control room and said, great, what more, what else do you have for me? That was his way of producing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's marvelous. What else do you have for me? And then turned to me and said, remember where you made the first one, you know. Now, for me to go to Europe, I ran into some people who were here on the ship who said, we saw you in Gävle in 1956, Sweden. It was my first trip over, and Mr. Basie had prefaced the thing by saying, oh, you've been killing them in the States, haven't you? But these people don't understand no English. Let me see what you're going to do now.
Yeah, right.
So we go out and we do what we do. Every day I have the blues and that stuff, and they've got 10,000 people standing on these chairs and cheering. And I said, Bass, what are we going to do? He said, for once, you're going to quit while you're ahead.
That was Basie.
That was Basie.
That was Basie, yeah.
But that's just one instance. 1973 now, I'm sitting at a counter in Yugoslavia. I can't even remember which city it was. Backstage, because, you know, they have artists, place for artists to have a drink and some food. That's backstage.
That's
but people from the theater can come back through a door, and you can get into the theater through a door. And they were standing there with stacks of LPs. And I signed each one, and Norman sitting beside me right here at the bar. And I said, you know, you're very much responsible for this, you know. I let him know that I knew. It was between him, Voice of America, and Armed Forces Radio, stuff like that. Your experiences with him have to be...
He had great insight. Norman had great insight.
Norman
Granz had the facility to listen to various players and pair them, and in some cases pit them one against the other.
Yes.
You know, I remember we were listening to one player, I won't call names, we were listening to one person play, and he'd say, well, he can play. I'd like to hear him with little jazz, you know.
Sparks.
Roy Andrews, you know.
Sparks.
And I said, why? I said, why don't you just do an album with him? He said, we'll do them with him, but, you know, I like to hear them get together. I like to see who's going to come out. There's going to be some bloodletting.
There you go.
You know, and he always thought that way.
Yes,
you know?
sir. Yes.
And many of the great sessions were produced on that basis.
Exciting.
Yeah.
I saw Benny Carter do the same thing with Joe Newman and Cat Anderson. You wouldn't think that duo, you know, would do it, but it's one of the most exciting things you ever want to hear. And the Japanese went crazy.
That's right.
You know, went absolutely crazy. 17,000 of them, you know.
We did the Trumpet Kings in the studio, and then he did it again at Montreux. He had Clark Terry, Dizzy, right?
Oh,
and Roy, and
Sparks.
Basie's remark, he was on the bill with us that night. Basie's remark before we came out, and Norman said, okay, the trumpets are up next, and Basie was sitting in a chair. You know how you sit there and sort of overlook the whole situation, but Basie said, somebody's going to get hurt tonight. Said somebody's going to get hurt.
But it made music and some of the most exciting things that ever were played, and everybody was excited about it.
Because you stretched. You know, no matter what happens, when you're playing your thing, that's one thing.
Yeah.
You're doing what you know you do, and you're in that particular sphere. But when somebody else enters your your sphere of operation, then it becomes, you know.
I laugh because you told the story on yourself. Somewhere I heard you telling the story on the air. You were playing and you got into some stride and some and piano, and you were playing it, and you said you couldn't get out of it. It was just came in. It just happened, you know. And and you happened to look in the wings. They was basically going.
That's right. That's right. He brought a baseball bat. We used to do the Satch and Josh thing.
Yeah.
One night with the two pianos, and one night he came out on the stage. Norman said, and on the two pianos you have Oscar Peterson and Bill Basie. Would you welcome them? And I walked up from this end, and Basie walked from the other. He had a baseball bat.
For those of you that don't quite understand, I must explain. You see, Basie and Oscar did a thing together, and they Satch and they told a story about Satchel Paige. Josh Gibson, who was the greatest hitter, I guess, in baseball at the time, Negro baseball. He told Satchel Paige, he said, "My mother and father are coming to watch me play."
That's right.
And at some point, Satchel, would you please let me hit one? You know. And so Satch said,
"Okay."
It's not. He didn't say. He said, "Oh, all right, it's like that," and then went on. So now the game is on, and Josh comes up, and knocks the dust off his spikes, and steps in, and looks at Satchel. And Satchel shakes his head like this, and then, aspirin, aspirin, aspirin. So finally, the third time he came up, this happened twice. Third time he came up, you see, Josh knocked the dust off his cleats, looked up at Satch and said,
"You can't have it today.
You cannot hit it today." So the idea was, Basie would look across at the two pianos and look at Hawkins just to say, "Are you gonna let me hit just one today? Can I hit a key? Come here, I hit a key every now and then." That was so, and you had to know the story, you know.
Oh, he was beautiful.
He was so.
But you know,
beautiful.
he did so much with the piano in doing so little, as many people think. But he did a lot, you know, because Basie could destroy you. Whatever you played, we'd play, as we call them, eights, challenges. 8 bars for him, 8 bars for me. And I'd play my 8 bars, you know, and do my thing. And Basie would come up to his 8 bars, and he'd go like, "Ticky-ticky," and wipe me out. You know, he had that ability because his timing was impeccable. His choice of where to put what.
You know, he used to be a drummer.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know?
No. I
I
knew he played organ. I didn't know he played drums.
He was a drummer once.
No,
You know,
I'm not surprised.
as was who else? Lester Young.
Lester Young was a drummer?
Yeah, Lester tells a story about
His
it.
brother was a drummer,
He
Lee.
tells a story about it. He played drums. He says, and by the time I got through packing up all them drums, all the other ladies was gone with all the ladies. There was no ladies left at all. The other ladies had took them, and so I got me something that I could throw in a suitcase and move real quick with.
But Lester Young was also another. He was an instigator. He loved pianists.
Yes.
You know, and I remember there was a young man on the tour by the name of Bobby. Oh, he's a pianist. I can't think of it. He used to call him Bobby Socks.
Oh yeah.
And I remember we were standing backstage playing one night, and Bob said to him, "Hey, Prez, do you know this tune?" He started to play. And Prez came up behind me, stood, and he looked, and he said, "Bobby Socks," he said, "I see what you're doing with your right people, but what are you going to do with these left people over here that are just sitting on the piano?" Because he was waiting to hear the stride left hand, you know, and he couldn't do it. But,
Lord.
Most of those guys, Ben Webster was a
stride
piano player.
Oh yeah, he could play that thing. You know,
That's
he
right.
loved that. But Ben Webster was that was another case of. I think that we were so blessed to have come through a time when we had those people to listen to appreciate, and to just to make us lose ourselves in what they did, because they were capable of Ellington. I'd get lost in his beauty, the beauty of of the chords, the beauty of the way the band played together, the way they would breathe together, and the sound that they made, from Otto Hardwick to all of the guys.
Johnny Hodges.
Oh, Hodges, of course, and the
Sam
baritone
Madden.
and the baritone player.
Oh, man.
You know,
Good Lord.
don't forget that he was a baby when he joined the band. I understand, from Boston. I can't think
Harry
of his
Carney.
name. Harry Carney, yeah. And Ben Webster when he got in there. My first record, the first record I bought was Coco, and the second was Truckin',
Yeah.
and then Cottontail.
Yeah, and they kept coming.
Oh my God!
And they kept coming.
Yes, they did.
And that band was, Louis Bellson was telling me that band was tailored for itself.
Yes.
It was individual. And he said when he got in the band, he looked at the drum book and he couldn't find any parts in there.
That's funny.
And he went to Duke and he said, Duke, how am I going to play these things? Duke said, well, with a man with your kind of musical intelligence, it should be no problem.
Oh, God.
Duke was responsible for me doing some solo work. He said, I remember one night I'd come out, we were on the tour with him, and he had the big band, I had the trio. And we were getting ready to go on. He was standing in the wings with Norman Granz and myself, and he said, tell me, he used to call me the Maharaja of the piano. He'd say, tell me, Maharaja. He said, have you given any thought to, I think Norman had instigated him. He was trying to get me to play solo piano. I kept saying, no, I want to play trio piano. And Duke quietly said, have you given any thought to playing solo piano? I said, no, Duke, I'm not a solo piano player. I don't do that. I said, I'm using the trio. He said, well, he said, the trio's beautiful. He said, I'm the first, I'm there whenever you guys play. But he said, have you ever thought that, and the elegant way he'd get into it, he'd say, have you ever given any thought to the fact that people might like their caviar without the eggs and the onions? That's the way he put it.
He was.
Yeah, he was something else.
Very special.
He was, yeah. I'm thankful that I was fortunate enough to have been reared in that era. Even though I was a bystander, I was a listener at the outset of it, and was fortunate enough to be able to hear all of these greats and learn from them. And that's the thing that I tell. I teach inadvertently at York University in Toronto. And I tell the young players, they come to me with problems. I say, go down to the record library and get this album by Johnny Hodges, or this album by Ben Webster, or this album by Coleman Hawkins, or Roy Eldridge, or Dizzy, and listen to it. Because that's the whole thing. I think that is a detriment to the growth of jazz today, is that business, money, certainly agents and everything, have intervened to the point where the youngsters' heads are filled with things other than the musical things.
Yes, that's
They're
so
filled
true.
with, how many people do we get in this auditorium? How many albums can you sell? How many dates can you do in a year? And this sort of thing.
Where is my monitor?
That's right. And the thing is, you have to go to you have to first settle, as I said, you have to first settle your thing with that instrument.
You got to negotiate with
That's
that
right.
instrument every night.
That's
I
right.
have to negotiate with mine. Every single performance, I have to negotiate. Say, now, how are we going to do it? How are we going to do this tonight?
I had a thing I've had going for years and years now. When I'm on the road and I have to perform with the trio, even in the nightclubs, after 5 o'clock at night, I don't speak to anybody.
Right.
Because mentally, I'm already thinking about that gig.
Right.
I'm thinking of all the things that I can do tonight that I perhaps did not do last night,
right,
or the night before, and that I should correct and do properly, And it takes that kind of thought.
Oh, yes.
And that's what I tell them. I said, this is no fun and games thing. This is dedication.
Many times my wife will say to me, "You didn't hear what I said, did you?" And I said, "Darling, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, but I'm planning something, in our presentation, and consequently I didn't hear you. So please forgive me, but you have my undivided attention now if you repeat it, you know." But you have to plan it when it comes to you to do that.
That's right.
When it happens, and you better sometimes write it down.
That's right.
Because you will forget it.
I jumped up out of bed halfway through the night with an idea for a tune.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was about your composing and stuff and writing. That's good. No, it's so good.
Yeah, well, it's...
Go ahead. You write it down.
I write it down, or I get it down on an instrument or record it or whatever I want to do, because the next day it might not come back.
Oh, it's gone.
It might not come back.
Edward used to keep Duke. He kept the piano beside the bed. Little, what were those things?
Fender Rhodes?
No, not a Fender Rhodes. The other one that they used to play all the time. I've forgotten the name of them now, but he kept that little thing right beside his bed and paper, right here by his left hand, so that he could come right out of the bed and do it, or didn't have to get out of the bed to do it.
That's right.
And these things that are given to us to do. I'm so pleased that you are writing. I'll tell you why. Roselle Gale was a good friend of our Tatum, and he used to beg Art to write. Art, he says, "I'll write it down for you, don't worry. But you should write." He said, "Oh, Roselle, I don't want to write."
You're caught up in the playing.
But the thing is, they'll remember composers. Composers are remembered much more so than performing artists.
That's right.
The records won't be played. We don't hear. I haven't heard an Art Tatum recording on a radio, not even on a jazz station, in I don't know how long.
I know. And it's a shame.
Not one, man.
It's a shame.
And same thing with a performer like Nat King Cole. Every now and then you hear a Nat King Cole record, but they didn't compose anything. I'm so pleased that you are, because that will last. Writing always lasts.
Yes, it does.
It gets through.
Yeah, it outlasts the players, unfortunately, but it does. People today will recognize Tchaikovsky. They'll recognize Ellington.
You're right. Right.
But if you play them an Art Tatum record, they wouldn't know what you're talking about many times. Or it could be, it could be a dizzy.
That's right. And it's as fresh today as it was when it was the day that they did it.
That's right.
Just as fresh. Their music today, is just as fresh and beautiful and inspiring and awe-inspiring, rather.
The other side of that I found, Joe, was when I was ill a couple of years ago and couldn't play, I turned to writing. And I found it gave me an insight, a better insight into myself. Because I'd write something, then I'd go back and listen to it, take it apart and say, now why did I do that? And then I started to discover my innards and what ticks inside of me. And you don't think of that when you're going by, the notes are going by, or the bars are going by like a blur, and you're busy playing. You don't think about all of that. You're thinking of what you're doing at that moment, and you get up and you walk away and it's over.
Right.
Not with writing. You question a lot of things when you write.
Well, one thing about it, you can always do it over, or you can always improve it, or embellish it,
That's right.
or add things to it, or delete, if in case
That's
you feel as though it's too busy. I mean, you have all of those alternatives going for you. Listen, I want to thank you for taking the time, which is our only gift.
Yeah,
The
that's
time to spend with us, and this particular thing that we're doing will go into the archives at Hamilton College, and future generations will be able to listen to it and glean from it, I hope.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Oscar Peterson.
You don't have to thank me. It's my pleasure.
And I'm Joe Williams. It says here in small, fine print,